Love You to Death, Stan Kraychik Mystery, Book 2. Writer Grant Michaels, publisher St. Martin's Press, New York, 1992. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 19, A Leap of Faith. My friend Ruko lives in the Fenway Studios in a spacious skylit duplex where she paints impressionist watercolor scenes from her summertime travels around the world. Her excellent work has won her prizes and exhibits and fame. Our connection goes back before her days of great celebrity and the give and take arrangement we have with her car. I contribute to the expenses, so I get to use it whenever it's available. Still exists without question. Ruko remains a true friend despite her recent elevation to artist Valhalla. I have a set of car keys, so after brushing the accumulated snow from the hood and the windows of the old station wagon, I climbed inside, ready to begin my night's sortie. The convenience of a private carriage without the hassles of ownership, I thought with the naivety of someone who never drives during wintertime. Inside, attaching to the dashboard, was one of those yellow stickies, onto which Ruko had pinned in one of her many distinctive calligraphics the word oil. It was typical of her to render so artistically a political reminder about fossil fuel. I pushed the key into the ignition switch and turned the frozen lock. Required extra force to twist it to the start position. The starter groaned painfully and barely turned the engine over. The sluggish battery seemed to resent my intrusion on its hibernation. Was there enough juice to get the engine going? After a few worrisome minutes of pathetic sounds from under the hood, the engine stumbled to unsteady life. Puffs of black smoke trailing behind, I maneuvered the car out of the parking lot and onto the Massachusetts Avenue, heading south towards Dorchester and Forest Hills, where Mary Finney and John Lau lived. I went to Mary Finney's place first, since it was closer, but no one was home there, so I continued on to Forest Hills. By then, the car was warm and running more smoothly, and I was feeling more confident, too. Once in Forest Hills, I saw that some parts of the neighborhood had retained their prim, white, middle-class aura with well-kept houses and sidewalks cleared of snow. Some of the charming cottages even had long icicles hanging down from the roof in perfect complement to shuttered windows and snow-covered hedges. I found John Lau's house easily on the wide, well-lit street. Instead of his staid maroon sedan in the driveway, another car was parked there, a boxy generic thing. I guessed whose car that had to be. The house lights were on. I parked Ruko's wagon on the street and walked to the front door. I rang the bell, waited, rang it again, waited some more. Then finally banged directly on the door. I sensed someone moving behind it, then heard the sharp clack of the peephole being opened and shut. "I know you're in there," I shouted, then realized what a fool I was being. If John Lau and Mary Finney had purposely killed two people and had inadvertently killed another, why did I think myself immune from harm? What was to stop them from shooting me dead on the spot, then claiming that I'd been intruding on their property? Like Liz Carlini, I seemed to have lost my survival instinct. Then the door opened slowly. I prepared myself to avert the barrel of a gun, if it emerged through the crack, but instead the face of Mary Finney appeared with its usual disapproving scowl. Now at last I knew the origin of that anger. It was mostly disappointment. "What do you want here?" she barked. That seemed to be her opening line with me, and no matter where we met. "I want to talk to you and John." "He's not here, and I have nothing to say to you." "Mary, I know why you and John did what you did, but you should both give yourselves up. Don't make it worse." "Get away from here before I call the police." "Go ahead. Then you can hear me tell them what I found out today about you and Helen Kingsley and your stepbrother Prentice and how you lost everything and—" "Quiet!" she snapped. "Get away from me. I don't want you near me." "But even when the police arrest you and John, they can't force you to testify against each other since you're married." She glared at me. "Where'd you hear that?" "It's true, isn't it?" "It's none of your damn business. I figure it's all part of your plan to take over the company. If you're married to your business partner, chances are you won't get double-crossed." "That's not why we got married." Don't tell me it was for sex or something sordid like that. You shut your dirty mouth. Maybe it's an Oedipal king kind of marriage? You're the mommy and he's the naughty boy? Mary Finney's face became livid as I continued to provoke her. It sure is a neat arrangement, though, with the two of you trying to swipe half the estate from Prentice Kingsley and Liz Carlini and Dan Dougherty. Too bad you didn't check out the legal complications before you started killing people. You didn't get anything from the estate before, and you won't get anything now, and you certainly won't get away with the deaths of 3 people. Not if I have anything to say about it. You don't know anything about the estate. This all started long before you were even born, so what do you know? I did a little research, Mary, and I know about you and the Kingsley family, and I know that 3 people are dead and the killer is still free. The question is, who's at the bottom of it all? Is it you, or is it John? I had nothing to do with the killings. Then it's John. Mary stared at me. The opaque pupils of her eyes seemed to block any part of her real self from coming out. Maybe it's true, she said. Maybe he's finally taking care of old business that was never settled right. So he's out to get Liz Carlini? You'd better get away from here before he comes back, before he has a real reason to shoot someone for trespassing. Her threat gave me exactly the information I needed. Now, I was certain that John Lau had gone to Abigail to kill Liz Carlini. I left Mary Finney standing at the door, looking slightly bewildered. Perhaps she couldn't believe she'd actually scared me off. Well, she had. I had more important things to do. I drove away quickly and looked for a payphone, which was not easy to find, in that part of town, especially one that worked. For a car phone now. When I found a public phone, I just tried calling Liz Carlini and Abigail to warn her of John Lau's arrival. All I got was the answer machine with Prentice Kingsley's message. It was strange to hear a dead man's voice asking you to leave a message. I left a rather frenetic one, telling Liz that John Lau was on his way out there. Then mid-sentence I wondered, was I too late? Had he already done the deed? Was he standing there at that very moment, screening the call, listening to me blabber away everything I knew? I hung up fast and called Lieutenant Branco at the station. He wasn't there, so I called his private number, the one he'd given me for emergency use only, in case I had urgent information for him. Hell, this was urgent. Branco answered on the second ring. I quickly explained what had happened, but as usual, he didn't want to believe me. He actually accused me of having a Dick Tracy complex. That was the last straw for my patience, since my true hero is Perry Mason. I heard myself screaming at him over the phone. God damn it, Vito! Just get someone out there! Then I slammed the receiver down, feeling like a real He-Man, one who was on a first-name swearing basis with a big-shot cop. I got back in Ruco's car and headed onto the expressway. Going north, I broke the speed limit all the way to Abigail. That was just another of many mistakes I made that night. The aged station wagon couldn't bear the strain of high-speed driving. There on Route 128, when I was nearing my destination without warning, the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. All shapes of colored icons were blinking and beeping at me, telling me to stop the engine and abandon ship. One of the lighted panels said, "Check gauges," and at that critical moment, my first response was to question the spelling. There's no predicting how your mind will focus in an emergency. I pulled the car onto the shoulder and turned off the engine. I waited 5 minutes, thinking maybe if it cooled down. But it took 15 precious minutes before I could start the engine without a repeat performance of the dashboard special effects. Once I got the car going again, I found if I kept the speedometer under 40, is such a thing possible on Route 128? The lights only glowed instead of blinking brightly, and the buzzers and beepers remained silent. Along with everything else, after tonight I'd probably have to spring for an engine overhaul, or perhaps even replace Ruco's car. Finally, got to Abigail. I drove the car at a crawl through the center of town and noticed a snarl of police cruisers and people clustered around one part of the marina. Had John Lau already killed Liz Carlini down here near the water, not up at the house? I stopped and asked an observer what had happened. As it turned out, it was a bomb scare on one of the large yachts, when I wondered if Liz had planned to leave Abigail by boat to escape from John Lau that way. Perhaps he'd foreseen her scheme and prevented it. Even if there was no bomb, the mere threat of one could disrupt her escape plans. I got back in the car and drove up the hill to the Kingsley home. On the incline, the dashboard began to glow again more brightly the higher I climbed, until finally, with nary a clink or a pop, the engine just stopped, completely dead. I got out and witnessed a colorful cocktail of steaming, viscous fluids dripping out from under the chassis. Ruko's poor car had apparently gassed its last, but I had no time to mourn its demise. I said a quiet thank you to it, then trotted the rest of the way up the hill. On the crest, I jogged along the curving road until I finally saw the Kingsley house ahead. Then my stomach lurched. There in the driveway was John Lowell's stage sedan alongside Liz Carlini's glitzy touring car. The house lights were on, and all seemed quiet and peaceful. Had he killed her already? I moved stealthily around to the back of the house, to the dramatic expanse of sea, sky, and land. The heavens were clear and dense with stars, a sight rarely seen in the city, and the moon's bluish light cast sparkles on the ocean water. How could cold-blooded murder happen in a setting like this? But that same moonlight also gave the wet, grassy land an eerie glow. I heard the surf bashing and pounding against the jagged rocks lying beneath the high bluff at the edge of the property. I turned my eyes toward the house. The solarium glowed with a hospitable warmth from within that seemed to say, "Welcome to Murderland." Through the glass walls I could see John Lau and Liz Carlini inside. She was seated and still very much alive, but John was standing over her with a gun aimed at her neck. On my cat-quiet feet, I slipped silently into the house through one of the side doors. Once inside, I crept soundlessly toward the solarium until I could overhear their words. John Lau was trying to force Liz to sign something. "Why should I sign it?" she asked smartly. "Go ahead, John, shoot me. What will you get then?" "I told you it's not for me, it's for her. There was supposed to be a trust for Mary when Helen Kingsley died." "Where is it then, John? Maybe there never was a trust. Maybe it was all in Mary's mind. Or maybe it's all a lie and Helen Kingsley never intended to provide for her the way Mary claims." "Then it's up to you to do it now." "I don't owe Mary Finney anything. Besides, I'm helpless. The estate is in probate." "I don't believe you." "So what are you going to do about it? You've already killed Danny and Prentice. Are you going to shoot me just to find out that I'm telling you the truth?" "I don't care about them. Mary is right. They were perverts anyway. It's no loss that they're gone." "So now there's just one more person to remove. Is that what you're thinking? John, then you and Mary can have the whole company in your fat little hands. Is that what you want?" "We deserve it. Prentice had everything handed to him while I had to work and work. He was a Kingsley. He had every right to his mother's money. He was her flesh and blood. But I'm blood too. I'm his half-brother. You're just his wife. I have more right than you." Liz was about to counter that remark when I rushed in behind John and put my Slavic limbs to that magic word. My legs, at least, are still full of young kick. It took just one swift boot under his arm, the one that was holding the gun, to set it off and send it flying through the air. The bullet hit one of the huge glass panels in the solarium. Roof high overhead, the tempered glass shattered and showered us with pebbly crystalline pellets. The next second, I knocked John Lau behind his knees and he fell to the floor. I straddled him from behind and pinned him down. Liz exclaimed, "Thank God you came!" "Where the hell's your bodyguard?" I asked. Liz positioned herself behind me. I said, "What are you waiting for, Liz? Call the police." "There's an emergency at the marina," she said calmly. "All police personnel are there." "Bad timing. We need help here." "That all depends," she said, her voice now strangely untroubled. From his face-down position on the floor, John Lau was struggling against my weight. "Let me go," he said. "You've got it all wrong." He twisted his head backwards and was looking up at me. Then his eyes shifted to something going on behind me. I turned my head. Liz was holding John Lau's gun and aiming it directly at the two of us on the floor. "You meddlesome little twit," she said to me. I arranged that false alarm down at the marina just to keep the local police occupied tonight. I wasn't taking any chances. A bomb scare is the most exciting event that's happened out here in 50 years. I invited John here for a little conference, a final settling of accounts, but I certainly didn't expect him to arrive armed. She shifted her eyes toward me. Now, thanks to you and your fumbling intrusion, I'm back in charge of the situation. The rest of this ought to be easy. She'll kill me, said John from under me. That's right, said Liz. Finally, stupidly, I realized the truth. It's you, Liz. You're the one? Who else? Who else could have had such lousy luck right from the very beginning? At the gala reception? That stranger ate the truffle I prepared for Dan Dougherty. God, what confusion. Why did you want to poison Dan? To save my marriage. My husband was losing his senses. He'd named Dan Dougherty as an heir. Imagine that. A whole corporate fortune was about to be redistributed because of a young man's charms. It wouldn't be the first time, I replied, and recalled that I had ascribed the same motive for Dan's killing to Mary Finney, except that she hadn't acted on it. John Lau said, he was going to get my share. Without acknowledging him, Liz continued, I tried logic, I tried emotion, I even tried lying, but nothing would change Prentice's mind. He was smitten with Danny, blinded by his feelings for him. So killing Danny was the simplest answer. You could have given up the money. Liz ignored me. And there'd be two ideal suspects. Rafik, that charming gold digger who expected Dan to give him whatever he wanted, and John here, whose fundamentalist beliefs and insane jealousy of Prentice might drive him to kill a young homosexual. I didn't do any of it, screamed John Lau. I wanted to, but I didn't. He seemed on the verge of crying, which surprised me given his appearance of strength. Liz ordered me to get off him and let him up, so I did, but John remained crouched on the floor, trembling in fear. I stood up and faced Liz. But that first attempt to kill Danny failed, I said. Yes, and the truffle flavors got confused too. Prentice could have been poisoned by accident. Fortunately, the police believed the most obvious thing, that Laurette Cole had clumsily cleared her boyfriend. She smiled slyly. You see, there are advantages to being educated, professional, and white. But you still wanted to kill Danny. Yes, and it was simply a matter of timing. I knew he was staying here in Abigail with Prentice, and I knew that Prentice went for a run every morning. It was his only addiction, bless his boring purity. He ran every morning between 7:30 and 8:30, like clockwork. So, if you came here within the hour, you'd be pretty sure that Prentice would be gone. Yes, and if by chance Prentice was here, well, I do have a right to come to my own house in Abigail, don't I? Besides, I might simply have wanted to warn him of John's threats. I never threatened you, John Lau wailed. But Prentice wouldn't know that, replied Liz smugly. John went on. You have no right. The money is ours. I was concerned more with Liz Carlini and the gun she held than with John Lau's pleas about money. How did you get Danny alone, I asked. That was tricky, since now I intended the blame for Danny's death to fall on Rafik. The timing was crucial, so when I got to the center of town, I called the house on my mobile phone. That's why Ben remembered your arriving earlier. Yes, he seems to remember everything but my name. The engine was stalling terribly that morning, and I had to stop for help. While Ben adjusted something under the hood, I used the car phone to tell Rafik that the Immigration and Naturalization Service had come to the factory looking for him, and since he'd been working without proper papers, he wouldn't want to be found. So your phone call scared him away from the house long enough for you to go in and kill Danny. Yes, it really was that simple. You see, Venos, like any shrewd business person, I know how to adapt to changing circumstances, how to exploit an opportunity. But how did you manage to kill Danny so intimately? Another lucky break. He was asleep. The room smelled of sex. I imagine Prentice mounting him, and the idea that he would choose a young man instead of me, it made me furious, but you didn't know for sure that it was Prentice. I suspected it, and that was enough. When I saw Danny lying face down on the bed, his body was still glistening with sweat. It was so easy. The muzzle of the gun almost slipped right in. That's disgusting. Don't you judge me. You don't know what I've been through. My marriage was a sham. My life had no meaning. The new business was my only hope. Then Danny showed up and Prentice lost his reason. Liz sneered. What a fool I was, thinking that once Danny was dead, Prentice would reinstate me in the will. He didn't? No, in fact, he wanted to name this brain-dead creature, she pointed the gun at John Lau, as his heir. John interjected, "It's mine by right." "Not if you're dead," replied Liz. I asked, "Why did Prentice cut you out of the will?" Liz snickered. "He discovered something that made me unworthy of the sacred Kingsley name." "Not another man," she laughed. "You are so simple, Venos." John Lau remained crouched on the floor. He had covered his ears and was shaking his head. Apparently the facts were too difficult for him to bear. Liz said, "Poor thing, it's almost not worth killing him." "Why do it then?" "You both know too much." "It has to stop sometime, Liz. You'll surely be caught for killing us." "Then it won't matter if I do it." I obviously had to stall her until when? Hadn't Branko alerted the local police yet? "But why did you kill Prentice, Liz?" She smiled coyly. "You're trying to buy time, aren't you?" She shrugged. "Why not tell you then? At that point, it was the only way I could still get anything from the estate. See, even though Prentice had explicitly cut me out as his wife, I still stood to inherit what he'd intended for Danny until he named another heir." "But I thought you said John Lau was the next heir." "Prentice hadn't made that change yet, which is why I hadn't to act quickly." "But then you'd be the prime suspect." "Not really. I wasn't in the will. Technically, I had no motive for killing my husband." "But wouldn't Dan Dougherty's inheritance go to his heirs?" Liz let out a sly giggle. Dan Dougherty, with typical youthful arrogance, assumed that he would live forever, or at least longer than Prentice. He left his entire estate to Prentice in a gesture of false gratitude. Everything kind of canceled itself out. "So then you killed Prentice?" "Yes, but now the time and place were a challenge. I decided to do it at the very rest area on the highway near Dyke's Pond. I'd heard it's a place where men meet for sex." "How did you arrange to meet him?" "I got a Boston taxi driver to call and leave a message on the phone. Here in Abigail, saying that he wanted to meet Danny at the rest stop. It's amazing what people will do for money. The taxi driver thought it was a kinky joke, but Danny was already dead." "Yes, and I knew that would arouse Prentice's curiosity. Even if his relationship to Danny was platonic, there was still jealousy there. That's one thing Prentice was quite good at, being jealous. So I dressed the way a gay man does when he's out for sex. Blue jeans, t-shirt, leather jacket, boots, and went to meet him there. We don't all use the name drag, Liz, but it was still dangerous. You could have been seen. The risks are high when the stakes are high. I waited until Prentice's car was the only one at the rest stop. Then it was simply a matter of getting him to lower the window and then putting the gun in his mouth." "Didn't he resist?" "It's strange," she said, with a pensive look passed over her face. "Not at all. He seemed almost to want it to happen." "Did he know it was you?" "I don't see how he couldn't. Our eyes met. Who knows what drives people to act out their death wish? And the shots fired at your house. How did you manage to do that undetected?" Liz smiled. "It was another opportunity that begged to be exploited. All three neighbors with a limited view of our property were on vacation. It was still risky, but no one saw or heard, and it put suspicion on John." "Why me?" cried John Lau. "Because it served my purpose," replied Liz. "Liz, where does all this get you in the end?" She laughed. "I'll have the satisfaction of knowing that I didn't just sit idly by hoping for things to change, bemoaning my lot in life. I did something about it. I took action. I showed strength. Even if it meant killing people." She shrugged. "This time, that's what it meant." I shook my head. "I actually feel sorry for you. Go tell it to the village priest. Now, let's get going. We're taking a little walk, the three of us. I hope you'll enjoy your last stroll by the water." She kept the gun on low and me and directed us out of the solarium toward the bluff. I tried to keep her talking, hoping to reason my way out of this jam, at least until the local police arrived. What was taking them so damn long that it had an unsettling thought? What if Branko hadn't even called them? Out on the bluff, overlooking the private beach, I asked Liz, "What was it that Prentice found out to make him cut you off in his will? Was it that you'd had an abortion?" "Clever of you to guess. Yes, I got rid of it. I wasn't about to share anything with my offspring." "Even a possible Kingsley heiress?" I was sick of hearing about the Kingsley bloodline. I wanted my share free and clear of anything or anybody. But you killed 3 innocent people. You took matters into your hands that you had no right to. I'm surprised you're not accusing me of murdering the fetus too, with your self-righteous piety. That choice should be the woman's. Ha! You liberal sons of bitches really get me. It's easy for you to talk, you're a man, but I've had to struggle. I've had to sacrifice, I've given up the pleasure of my life for what I have, and no old ghost of a mother or two-timey young designer was going to ruin my chances. So Prentice and Danny were lovers? Liz shook her head. Never, she said. There was never a sexual thing between them. It was simply father-son thing. It had to be. Prentice simply wanted Dan to have some security. It was so simple you had to kill them both. John Lau spluttered. You're all a bunch of perverts. You're all burning hell. Dear, sad John, said Liz Carlini. If there is such a place, we'll all be meeting there. At least you'll confirm its existence. That ought to satisfy at least one question of your faith. She pressed us onward to the edge of the bluff. We stopped short of the precipice, and she said, Now, I'd like you both to embrace each other before you throw yourselves over the edge. Oh, no, wailed John Lau as he peered down into the craggy surf well over 100 feet below. She's really going to kill me. We're in this together, pal, I said. John pleaded with her. Maybe we could work something out. I'd give up any claim to the estate. I'll forget about the trust for Mary. Anything, I promise. Just please let me go. You silly man. You have nothing to give up. Now just hold on to each other. I want it to look like a pathetic lover's pact. Think of the tragedy. The world has turned its back on you, Danny, and Prentice are gone now. There's nothing left to live for. Just embrace and jump. It's very simple. Simple, simple, simple. Find another word, I muttered, and I rammed John Lau's heavy body into her. She fired the gun, and he went down. His falling seemed to surprise her. Before she could take good aim at me, I shoved her hard and knocked her to the ground. We wrestled for the gun. I struggled to get it from her while she tried to aim it at me. She was strong and wily, but my beautician's hands are strong and clever too. Finally, I wrangled the gun from her. Then I stood up and heaved it over the bluff onto the rocks far below. When I turned back, Liz was already running away. I raced after her on my springy Slavic limbs. I caught up to her and tackled. Me, who'd never played football in my life, now I was chasing women and knocking them down. I pinned her to the ground. She bit and clawed and kicked at me. She was lively and wriggly, and worse, dangerous, but the extra weight I carry around with me finally came in handy. I pressed myself onto her heavily and pinned her to the ground. Then I removed my belt after a lengthy and breathy struggle. I succeeded in binding her wrists to her ankles behind her. S&M bondage came to mind, and I mumbled an apology for taking a step backwards for women's rights. One thing I was never much good at, though, was trying knots, especially with leather belts. Almost as soon as I released the pressure of my body, Liz squirmed her way out of the belt. She got up and fled to the edge of the bluff. You come near me, I'll jump. Don't, Liz. I botched it all. I failed. It's not the end. What's left for me now? There's pain for your actions. That's worse than death. So you bail out instead of facing the consequences. Don't preach to me. I'm not preaching. I'm talking karma. You take your cosmic consciousness and shove it, Liz. But my voice was taken by the wind, unheard by Elizabeth Ann Carlini Kingsley. She had thrown herself over the bluff onto the craggy rocks below. I moaned and shook my head. Then I started to cry. Some moments later, though, the sound of the wind, I heard John Lau calling out weakly. He'd only been wounded and was plain dead to save himself. You better call me an ambulance, he said. I resisted the obvious retort. That's when the Abigail police finally came, running across the moonlit lawn in response to Branko's call from Boston. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.